Good morning, everyone. Today's Wednesday. Today we're starting Challah, Maseches Challah. Challah is a few prakim. It's only 4 prakim. So that's today, tomorrow, Friday, and Sunday. Then we go into Orla, then into Bikurim, and we have our Siyam on December 1st. Merch Hashem. Merch Hashem. Come on, moving along. Okay. Mishnah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph of Challah. Chamisha Devar, sorry. Today's share sponsored the Nishmas Aaron Nachum and Simcha Koyin, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shep, Slo Bracha Sar Bashmol Leib, and Binyan Moshe ben Yosef. May the Neshamas all have an aliyah. Amen. Okay, here we go. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph of Challah. Chamisha Devarim Chayevim B'Challah. There are 5 types of grain that are subject to the chiyuv of Challah. I mean, first of all, what is Challah? Challah is a portion of dough that when you need dough in order to make bread, you must separate a portion of the dough and give it to a Kohen. This is called challah. It's one of the matnas kahuna. Typically, we give the challah from the raw dough. If in the case of before you fashion the loaves, you have this big clump, this big pile of dough, usually about 5 pounds of flour. Then you take challah. In the matzah bakeries, they take the challah after the matzahs are baked, so you don't have a problem with chametz. They make the matzahs first, and they take the whole batch, the mafresh challah from the baked matzahs. Okay, so chamish devarim chayim v'challah. There are 5 types of grains that are chayiv in the that fall under the chiyuv of challah. Hachitim v'asorim v'akusmim v'shibul shua v'shifon. The wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. Dough made from any other type of grain is not chayiv in challah. Okay, so now we're going to talk about different laws that apply only to these 5 grains. So hari elu chayiv b'challah. These species are all obligated in challah, as we just learned. And they join with one another to reach the minimum amount needed for challah. And they are all subject to the isser of being chadash before Pesach, meaning you have to wait to eat the new crop until after the across of Omer. Omer, and the new crop of any of the 5 species may not be harvested before the grain of the Omer offering is harvested. We know that the Omer is brought on the 2nd day of Pesach and Tes Zayin Nisan, and anything that took root before that time, it becomes mutter after the korban, and anything that takes root after the across Omer only becomes mutter the following year on the 16th of Pesach a second time. That's what the issue of Yashan and Chodesh comes from. It comes from the across Omer. So, Omer, if the species took root before the Omer was harvested, Omer Matir, I just jumped the gun on that, I apologize. Then the Omer permits them for harvesting and eating, but if they did not take root until after the harvesting of the Omer, Asurin Ach Yovo Omer Haba, then they are forbidden until the next year's Omer arrives, meaning that they may not be harvested or eaten until the 16th of Nisan of the following year. Mishnah Beis, Ha'ochel Mehem Kazayis Matzah B'Pesach. If someone who eats a kazayis in the size of an olive of matzah made from any of these 5 species on the first night of Pesach, he has fulfilled his chiyuv to eat matzah. However, if he eats matzah made from other species of grain, he has not fulfilled his obligation. Kazayis chametz chayav b'ikares. Similarly, someone who eats a kazayis chametz with these 5 grains is chayav to kares, as is the penalty on Pesach. But if he eats it from other grains, he's not. It's not isser because they're not considered chametz. If one of these five species became chametz and became mixed up with any other type of food, hareza over Pesach, and one who owns this mixture on Pesach transgresses the Torah Isser of having chametz in one's possession. It just seems from the Mishnah that kitnius wouldn't be a problem because Ashkenazim are machmir when it comes to kitnius because perhaps it's going to look like chametz or become chametz. But according to the Mishnah, that's not the case. It's only those five grains. So if you have, either the kitnius would stomach not be an issue, but we don't pass on the Mishnah, so there goes that. I know there are men hapasim and one who makes a neder prohibiting himself from eating bread or from eating tvua of the grain. Also, behem it's forbidden to eat bread or grain of these five species. If he made a neder prohibiting grain, then he may not eat any of these five. But he would be allowed to eat bread or grain from other species, because the neder is only referring to these five grains. That's according to Omer. Chachamim say, "I know them in hadagan eno aser elamehen." Someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself eating dagan is forbidden to eat only the five species, but is permitted to eat the other species of grain. One second, what's the difference there? Okay, I'm not sure the difference between the two of them are, but anyways, and the five species are subject to the chiyuv of both challah and maaser, as we learned in the past Masechta. Mishnah Gimel. Elu chayavim b'challah b'turim and maaser. The following are chayiv and challah, but they are pater from maasers. You have to take challah from these, but we do not have to give maasers. Halekah v'ashicha v'apeya. The gifts to the poor, which are halekah, shicha, peya, v'hefker, and all of this grain. So we've already learned that you do not have to give maaser from those four, but they are chayiv for challah. The maaser rishon shenita truma. So the same thing with maaser rishon that had its truma taken out. So it's no longer chayiv maaser, but they still have to give challah on it. The maaser rishon, the hektish neftu, maaser sheni, and hektish that were redeemed are also chayiv to challah, but they are part of a maaser because it's already been done. Maaser Omer, and the leftovers from the Omer offering are also chayiv and challah, but part from maaser. Utvua shelo hevi a shlish, and grain that did not yet grow a third of its full growth is chayiv and challah, but pater in maaser. Because we said by maaser that it had to be fully grown and fully processed for it to be chayiv and maaser, and that's not the case regarding challah. Rav Lezer disagrees, and he says, grain that did not grow a third is pater from challah, and he compares the laws of challah to the laws of truma, and just as grain that did not grow a third is pater from truma, it's also pater from challah. Mishnah Daled. The following items are chayiv in maaser, but they're pater from challah. Now we're talking about the reverse case. They're chayiv in maaser, but they're pater from challah. Ha'orez, v'adochen, v'apargim, v'ashumshimin, v'akitnias. Ready. Dough made from rice, millet, poppy, sesame, and legumes, beans. All these are chayiv in maaser. Because maaser applies to any edible produce, not just the five grains. However, dough from these species are not chayiv challah because they only apply to the five grains, as we learned in Mishnah Aleph. The pachos mechameshes mevaim betua. Also, they are chayiv in maaser. If the dough is less than 5 which is 1.25 kav, which um uh which is a 1 second. How much is that? A quarter cup. Well, uh, I think it's usually about 5 pounds. Is this, okay. Anyways, I think it's around 5 pounds is what we pass what we pass about. So if you have dough that's less than the 5 of grain, then it's not chayiv challah, but it's still chayiv in maaser. Maaser doesn't have that restriction. Hasuvganin, suvganin, which are donuts, they, the sponge-like bread instead of a thick dough, which would be a donut. We have dushanin, and dushanim, which is made by mixing flour and water into a batter and then frying it in honey. Veha is cretin, which are wafers that are made from a very thin batter. The chalas hamisharis, and a pan loaf made by pouring hot water over dough. The hamaduma, and bread made from hamaduma, which is a mixture of chulin and truma flour, as we learned back in truma. Peturim and challah, all these things are pater from challah because they're not considered bread. Bread made from aduma flour is exempt because it's treated as truma, and truma is therefore exempt from the challah obligation because you already gave that gift to the kohen. You don't need to give a second one. Mishnah Hey. Isa shetchilasa suvganin, if a dough was made as suvganin at its beginning, it was a thin batter rather than a thick dough. The sofa suvganin and a suvganin at its end, it was fried in oil or cooked in water. The turban challah, it is pater from challah. Chilasa isa sofa suvganin. However, if it was made as dough at its beginning, as a thick dough, not a thin batter, and as sugaran at its end. First it started off as a dough, and then it was made into donuts, and it's fried or cooked. Chilasa sugaran v'sofa isa, or it was made as sugaran at its beginning, and as dough at its end. Before it was made as a thin batter, and then it was baked in an oven without liquid. Chayas b'chala, it is chayiv and chala, because in order for it to be chayiv and chala, it must either be made for the type of dough that's normally used for bread, which is a thick dough as opposed to a batter, even though the final product is not bread, or baked in an oven in the manner that bread is baked, even if it was originally prepared as a batter. V'chein ha-kinuv kaos hayavos. And similarly, kinuv kaos, which is a type of baby food made from ground up bread, are subject to the challah chiyuv, since at one point they were bread. Okay, Mishnah Vav. Hameisas, regarding the meisa, which is a bread made by pouring flour into hot water and then baking the mixture. Bishamai pochim, Bishamai patters it from challah, because such bread is considered cooked, not baked, and cooked bread is exempt from challah. Bishelo mechayven, Bishelo obligated in challah. They hold that since meisa is baked at the end, it is considered a baked item, which is subject to challah. A chalita, regarding a chalita, the bread made by pouring hot water onto flour and then baking it, Beishamai chayvin, Beishamai obligated in challah, because it is baked at the end, and it is thus considered a baked item. The Beis Hillel pochim, the Beis Hillel pater it, because it was originally cooked. Therefore, it's considered cooked bread, which is exempt from challah. Okay, new topic over here. We're talking about a carbon toda. Um, because the carbon toda has different types of breads. So here we go. Chalos toda rakike nazir. Regarding the loaves of a toda offering and the wafers of the nazir's offering, the law is as follows. Asa, this is still the Mishnah of Asan the Asma Pater. One made them for himself. He's prepared the breads for his own toda or nazir offering. He is Pater from separating challah. The bread is considered bread of hektish, which is Pater from challah. Limkor b'shuk chai. However, if he made them to sell in the marketplace to people who need them for their toda or nazir offerings, he 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 is he is chayav to separate challah. Since the seller knows that he might not find any buyers for his breads, he realizes that he may end up keeping the breads for his own use rather than bringing them as a korban. Therefore, they are not considered hektish and they are chayav in challah. Mishnah Zayin. We have Zayin, Ches, and Tes, and that's all for today. Let's go. Nachtom she'asa she'or l'chalik. The baker made a sourdough that was large enough to have a chiyuv of challah, but had in mind to divide the dough into portions less than the minimum challah amount, and to sell those portions to his customers. Chayav b'challah. The law is that he is chayav in challah, because he knows he might not be able to sell all the sourdough, and then he will bake the dough as one big bread. Since he may bake the amount that's chayav in challah, he must separate challah from the get-go. Nashim shenasnu lenachtom la'asos lehem sor. But in the case of women who each gave a portion of flour to a baker to make sourdough for them, and the baker made one big dough out of all the flour large enough to be subject to challah, the law is that if none of the women's portions was the amount that is obligated in challah, the two of them in a challah, the dough is parted from challah. In this case, he must divide the dough in order to return to each woman her portion, and therefore the portions will be smaller than the chiyuv of challah, and therefore he's not chayiv to take the challah. Mishnah Ches, Isas Haklav, regarding dog's dough. What's dog's dough? It was a type of bread that is used as animal food. It's usually made from bran. It's not eaten by most people. So we're going to find out whether or not you have to take challah off of this. Bisman she'aroim ochlin mimena, when the shepherds eat from it, meaning that the bread does not have so much bran, make it almost inedible. Chayev b'challah, then it is chayev in challah. Since the shepherds eat it, then it's considered bread. And we can make an eruv chatzeris with it. In order to make eruv chatzeris, obviously you need the string around the town, which we'll get a little more about this. We get to Erevin in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, whatever, soon. And then you would put and then you would put like a loaf of bread between the houses in order to permit carrying on Shabbos. We may make shitufei mevos with it. Shitufei mevos, which can be made with any food, permits carrying from a courtyard to an alleyway on Shabbos. We can bring us a mazon on it. We can join a zimun on it. And it may be made on Yontif, even though it's forbidden to bake food for animals on Yontif, since some of the bread will be eaten by the shepherds. It's considered baking for people and not animals. And the person may fulfill his obligation with it on Pesach, meaning that such bread is baked as matzah. Once one can eat this on the first night of Pesach to fulfill his chiyuv of matzah. Since it's considered bread, it can be made into matzah, which must also be bread, quote unquote. But if the shepherds do not eat from the bread, from the dog's bread, because it contains a large amount of bran, and the following laws apply. It's not challah, since it's considered animal food. And you cannot make an eru chaseres with it. And we may not make shitufim with it. We cannot separate samazon on it. And we do not join in a zimun over it. And it cannot be made on yontif because it's forbidden to do it. And malacha on yontif for animals. Yotze dechawasa bepesach. Yotze by dechawasa bepesach. The person cannot fulfill his matzah obligation with it on the first night of Pesach because it's not considered bread. In either case, it cannot become tummy under the laws of tumah of foods, whether it's eaten by shepherds or not. In the case of pressing need, even dog's bread that's not normally eaten by shepherds will be eaten by humans. Therefore, with regard to the laws of tumah, it's considered food. Regarding everything else, it's no good. And finally, Mishnah Tesh, Challah v'Teruma. Both Challah and Teruma are subject to the following laws. Chayavin, Chaliyam, Misa v'Chomesh. Non-Kohanim are chayiv to the penalty, to the death penalty for eating them if they did so intentionally, and to the penalty of chomesh if they ate them unintentionally. Right. You will end up from a pasuk actually. That Chaim said Yidei Shemayim for eating truma, and Chal is considered like truma. And then add on a chomesh if you ate a b'shogeg. V'asurim zarim, both are forbidden to non-kohanim, both challah and truma. Hey, nechse kohen, and they are the personal property of the kohen. V'olim be'echad meya, they become nullified in 101. They get mixed together with chulin. They become bata only if it's 100 parts of chulin for each part of challah or truma. And they require hand washing. One must wash his hands before touching challah or truma. And they both require knife. If the kohen became tamei and immersed in the mikveh, he must wait until knife will use challah or truma, as we learned in the first Mishnah of Brachos back in Elul. Nitalin tahar alatame. They may not be taken. They may not be taken from something that is tahar, from something that is tamei. Meaning that you cannot designate a tahar piece of dough as challah for tamei dough, or designate tahar produce as truma for tamei produce. Elam and hamukaf, and they are taken only from something that is close by. Challah and truma are to be close to the rest of the dough or produce when they are being designated. Umin hadavar hagamor, and they are to be taken only from something that's finished. In the case of challah, the dough must already be made before designating challah. In the case of truma, the produce must be fully processed. And Omer kol grane truma. Someone says all the grain in my silo is truma. V'chol isasi challah, or my entire dough is challah. He wants to give everything away. Omer klum, he has said nothing. It does not take effect. Ad shiur mixes unless he leaves over a part that is not truma or challah. Only a portion of the produce or dough is to be separated as truma or challah, not all of it. Thank you for joining us. We'll continue tomorrow with Perek Beis of challah. Have a wonderful day. Kol tov.